Well, lunchtime on Monday has arrived. You've already made it through the toughest part of the week, Monday morning, and, of course, the inevitable Sunday Chargers collapse. And you have made it to Bolts on Tap. Along with John Gennaro, I'm Ben Higgins. Welcome to Social Tap San Diego. We're live from J Street outside Petco Park. Greatest location for a television show ever in the history of television.
Absolutely.
I'm biased, but love it here. Absolutely. Did not love watching the Chargers game yesterday, at least at the end. I loved your idea of coming on, starting the show saying, hey, you know, we both had busy Sundays. Chargers had the game in hand. We turned it off with about 6 minutes to go. Let's talk about that easy win over the New Orleans Saints yesterday.
If that had happened, all of Bolts on Tap today would be the Chargers redeemed themselves. They are a better team than we thought. And let's look forward to see whether or not they can beat the Oakland Raiders on Sunday. But unfortunately, that's not the conversation we're going to be having, I don't think.
All right, well, you can participate on this show. You're watching via Facebook Live at our 10 News Facebook page, streaming. So I got the comments up here. You can also tweet us at Ben Higgins SD and at John M. Gennaro, and we'll take some questions. We'll read some of your comments over the next 30 minutes or so. The first comment, though, is why? Why does this keep happening to Chargers fans? Because this is not anything new. I mean, no. Chargers fans know. This team has a history of agonizing losses. We've already had one this season. The loss to the Chiefs has to go down as one of the more agonizing football losses you'll ever see. I think this one was even worse, but go back in history. The 4th and 29, Ray Rice, hated a little Ray Rice up the middle game. Yeah. The Monday Night Football game against the Broncos when they were up big on Peyton Manning at halftime. Of course, the Marlon McCree fumble game in the playoffs.
Heartbreakers.
Nate Kading missing field goals against the Jets. This team doesn't just lose. They lose in the most agonizing way possible. And does this happen to other football teams, or is it this basically only the Chargers that has losses in this quantity, this bad?
It happens to a lot of football teams. Basically, these types of things happen when you get soft, when you get conservative, when you start playing against the clock instead of playing against your opponent. Now, there are teams out there like the Baltimore Ravens, the New England Patriots, the Pittsburgh Steelers that are always playing against their opponents. They're always trying to get the win. The Chargers are not one of those teams. They were, in the regular season, one of those types of teams with Marty Schottenheimer as their head coach. But as soon as they got in the playoffs, they got conservative. That was Marty's track record, and that's why you had, Nate Kading missed field goals and the Marlon McCree thing, because that's when Marty got conservative. But Norv Turner would get conservative late with a lead. Mike McCoy certainly gets conservative at all times. And when you get conservative as an NFL team, you leave yourself open for situations like this.
This is going to be a crazy one. I can already tell. I mean, the Raiders Nation has already shown up on the Bolts on Tap Facebook stream comment section because, of course, it is Raiders Week. Normally, that'd be like the first thing. Hey, it's Raiders Week.
Yeah.
We can't get to Raiders Week until at least we put a little bit of dirt on Saints Week and what happens. So.
No, as a matter of fact, Charger fans this morning need to tip their cap to the Oakland Raiders and the Raider fans because that's a team that didn't give up. They fell behind. They gave up 2 touchdowns late to the Baltimore Ravens, but when they absolutely needed to come through, get a score, win the game, they had it in them to do it.
Is Mike McCoy on very thin ice, do you think, as head coach of the Chargers? According to everything I've seen so far today, he is still the head coach of the San Diego Chargers.
That's the first mention of Mike McCoy, so I'm going to have to take a drink.
Okay. The Mike McCoy drinking game?
No, that'll kill me in this 30 minutes. But Mike McCoy is not on thin ice. He needs to be, but he's not, because the San Diego Chargers refuse to hold their coaches accountable. Norv Turner was a better head coach than Mike McCoy is. But Norv Turner probably kept his job about 2 years too long. Mike McCoy has already kept his job a few weeks too long, a whole season too long. He needs to be fired immediately, but Dean Spanos is not going to make that move. Tom Telesco is not going to make that move. John Spanos is not going to make that move. So we're going to be stuck with this maybe for the rest of the season. Although I did say, I think it was last week, if the Chargers find a way to go 1-5 or 1-6 or 1-7 this season, they have to make a move.
To me, there's a lot of organizations with less patient ownership where Mike McCoy already would have been gone. He probably would have been gone at the end of last season or even, 3/4 of the way through last season, and certainly after a 1-3 start that has played out the way this 1-3 start has played out for the San Diego Chargers. But, the history of the Spanos family, they've been pretty patient with their head coaches. Certainly they were patient with Norv Turner. Probably 2 years too patient with Norv Turner. So you have to assume that we're going to get the same patience with Mike McCoy, and there's not going to be a knee-jerk reaction. Now, I saw a lot of reaction yesterday on social media saying, why are you blaming Mike McCoy for this loss? He didn't fumble the football. That was Melvin Gordon and Travis Benjamin.
I hate that argument so much.
I don't agree with it, but let's discuss it a little bit, because I do feel ultimately the Chargers' problems, while some of them specifically can't be prevented by the head coach, all do trace back up the coaching tree.
I think they trace definitely up to the coaching tree and up to Mike McCoy. And, the plainest way to state this is, if those fumbles happen, if Melvin Gordon fumbled that ball and he was on the New England Patriots, he wouldn't play next week. He might not play the week after, until Bill Belichick got to a point where Melvin Gordon proved to him that he deserved to carry that ball. He could be trusted with that ball. He wouldn't touch it ever again. And the same thing rings true for Travis Benjamin. But what are we going to see from the San Diego Chargers next week? We're going to see Melvin Gordon getting 25 touches. We're going to see him getting crunch time touches in a tight game. We're going to see Travis Benjamin all over the field getting thrown to as the number one target for Phillip Rivers. There's going to be no consequences whatsoever. That falls on the coaching staff. So yes, Mike McCoy was not physically out there fumbling the ball, but the culture and the system he has created within the Chargers locker room and on the field on Sundays is why these guys why they keep doing it. Melvin Gordon, after the game, when asked why he fumbled the ball, said, is a lack of focus. What do you mean it's a lack of focus? I would have, and I said this before the fumble happened on the Mighty 1090 on the Chargers postgame show, I would have handed the ball to Kenneth Farrow. And before he ran out on the field, I would have grabbed him by the face mask and I would have said, your number one job is to not fumble the ball. If you fumble the ball, I will cut you tomorrow. And he would have done, it didn't matter if he got 0 yards of carry. The clock would have run, and he wouldn't have fumbled the ball, and the Chargers probably would have won this game. But instead you have Melvin Gordon go out there, who already had 25 touches, who already was coming off knee surgery, who had a fumbling problem last year, and he knows, because now we're going to live it, he knows if he fumbles that ball, they don't have a backup plan. They don't have someone else they can go to, they can trust. He's going to be back on that field next week. There's no consequences.
Ultimately, though, I look at the Chargers as a team that resembles a very competent football team for large stretches of games and this season. 50-plus minutes against all four of their opponents. They've looked good. I saw someone tweeted, hey, if NFL games were 50 minutes instead of 60 minutes, the Chargers would be 4-0 right now instead of 1-3.
That's true.
So what happens at the end of these games that causes the Chargers to collapse? And while individually each game could have a different reason, you can point to a coaching decision, you can point to a mistake by the player, you can point to simply the defense giving up big plays. I think the common thread is that the Chargers are never at their best when the chips are in the middle,
right,
and the game is there to be taken. We have seen so many situations this season against Kansas City, Indianapolis, and now against the Saints, in which just one more play. There was the 4th and 2 touchdown yesterday. If they had knocked that down, if the hand had gotten on that ball, if Thomas, the wide receiver, had come down out of bounds, Chargers probably win the game. They take over. It's still a 13-point game. It's over at that point. Even if they fumble again, it's probably over. And we've seen that every game. So why can't the Chargers make that play? And to me, it looks like they become discombobulated at the end of these games. And that's what I trace to coaching. I went through last night on Sports Extra the final 6 offensive plays of the Chargers game yesterday. It was stunning because the last 6 offensive plays started with the Melvin Gordon fumble. The next offensive play was the Travis Benjamin fumble. Mm-hmm. Then they were behind. Phillip Rivers sacked. A fumbled snap that led to another loss and snap.
First fumbled snap of the season, too.
A sure first down that probably would have had them within 20 yards of a field goal dropped by Dontrell Inman. And it was tipped, I will say that.
On 3rd and 22, though, look, ball hits your hands, you got to come down with
Exactly. And then the desperation interception. I cannot remember seeing an NFL team ever putting together a streak of 6 offensive plays that horrendous in a row. I mean, there wasn't even one, gain of 1 yard up the middle to break that up. Every play was just disastrously bad, 6 in a row. And if you change just one or two of them, the Chargers end up winning the game again.
I've seen teams go through stretches like that where they have 6 to 8, just really horrendous plays, but never with a quarterback like this. Never with an elite quarterback like Phillip Rivers. Rivers is guilty as everyone else. I mean, look, when the Chargers were up 34-21, if you were asking me how did they get to that spot, really, the defense played well and Phillip Rivers played well. No one else deserved any credit whatsoever. Everyone else basically played like crap. But Phillip Rivers, when the pressure is on, when the temperature gets turned up, and we've seen this his entire career, he gets worse. He gets worse. And so while I've seen teams with bad quarterbacks go through 6 or 7, 8 plays in a row where they're terrible and they just can't get out of their own way, it doesn't happen with the teams that have quarterbacks like Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. Those guys are meant to right the ship. Phillip Rivers is not very good at righting the ship, but he is great at putting his team in a position to win, getting them up early. There's certainly enough talent on this team to win. The problem for me, and again, I'm going to attribute this to coaching, but maybe it's also a leadership thing, everyone gets so tight at the end of games, the end of close games. In the last 15 games, decided by one score or less, the Chargers are 3-12. That, to me, says when it gets close at the end of the game, everyone gets tight. It's, to use a baseball analogy, there are the guys that sit there before an important play saying, please don't hit it to me, please don't hit it to me. And then there are the guys that are saying, hit it to me, I want to make the play. The Chargers are entirely in the first mindset, and none of them are saying, give me the ball, I want to make the play.
Now, presumably, if the Chargers did fire Mike McCoy, Ken Wisenhunt would become the interim head coach of the team.
Absolutely.
He's got coaching experience. I don't know that it's going to make any difference at all.
It's not great coaching experience.
To make Ken Wisenhunt the head coach. But at this point, I've seen enough of Mike McCoy to know what we get from Mike McCoy. There's not going to be some revelation that Mike McCoy comes to at this point where he changes his style, he changes his attitude, and the team follows behind. He is who he is. He believes in his consistency. He believes in his approach, and that approach is not working. So This would simply, to me, be addition by subtraction. Take that element out, and maybe there's the possibility of some change going forward.
Right. At this point, this Chargers team is not going to make the playoffs. They're not going to make a run through the playoffs. They're not going to make the Super Bowl. They're not going to have a chance at winning a championship with Mike McCoy as the head coach. That's a fact. And once you swallow that fact and deal with it, you realize that literally any other option is better because it gives you the possibility. I don't care if it's Ken Wisenhunt. I don't care if it's John Pagano. I don't care if it's the special teams coach. I don't care if they bring in Mike Martz and say, here, your team. Any other option gives you the possibility that this team could turn it around. Mike McCoy does not give you that possibility.
All right, going to get to some of the questions we've gotten on Facebook and Twitter in a moment. I didn't bring my whiteboard for Mike's mistakes. I would have brought up today, though, the 2 timeouts they burned in the second half in what I thought were situations where you don't want to be burning timeouts.
Yep.
First and goal at the 1 for the Saints, where the only chance that timeout means anything is if you stop them 3 straight times from getting into the end zone. And then late in the game, was it a 3rd and 2 with the play clock running down to like 2?
Yeah.
And a pressure situation for the Saints, and the Chargers kind of bailed them out with a late timeout in this situation. I didn't like either of those timeout calls by the Chargers in the second half.
And I didn't really understand, unless it was John Pagano making the call, I didn't really understand why they were calling timeouts, like you said, to bail out the New Orleans offense. I mean, unless you just see a matchup that you're like, oh, Lord, we're about to give up something huge. I just go, look, it's their offense, it's our defense, let's go out there and play ball. I like to see timeouts used for clock management on the offensive side, and also when the offense is, a little confused about what it's doing out there, maybe the play clock is running down. That's not what we saw yesterday. It was, to your point, almost a complete waste of timeouts by the Chargers.
All right, a lot of the comments are of the vein of our friend Eric Stengel, who has one question, WTF? San Diego Sufferer, who asks, why do the sports gods hate us?
Yeah. I think it was
San Diego.
I think it was Daniel Jeremiah who went on Darren Smith's show last week and literally asked the question, why does God hate Phillip Rivers?
He really shouldn't.
Phillip
Rivers, big God guy.
Yeah,
he's had your back, God, his entire life, and you do him like this, that's just wrong.
Yeah.
But there are some other questions as well, and one of them you get a lot is that the coaching is not the problem. Many fans feel like ownership is the problem of
I
the
think
team.
that's part of it.
But it's really the one problem that you can't change. You can't fix. The owners are the owners, and
Right.
unless they sell the team, which there's been no indication that the Spanoses would like to sell the team or are interested in selling the team, it doesn't do a lot of good talking about it. But a fro among tweeted to us, "You're hired to convince the Spanos family to sell the team. What's your most convincing argument?" I thought that was an interesting question. How would you try to convince the Spanoses to sell a team that's been in the family now for 30-plus years? They love being part of the NFL. They love running football. How would you even try to convince? Couldn't. If I owned an NFL team, I don't know that you could convince me to sell it. So that's a tall task.
When is the last time the Spanos family really looked around and said, man, this is fun? You know, a win over the Jaguars doesn't do it. Maybe the playoff win from 2013, but the NFL and the other owners basically spit in your face back in January when you tried to move to LA. Your fan base essentially hates you, and the coaching staff just seems to be digging a deeper and deeper hole for your team to try and get out of each and every year. You have wasted the best years, the prime years, essentially the entire career of maybe the best player who ever put on a Chargers uniform. My argument to Dean Spanos and the Spanos family would be, look yourselves in the mirror. Are you actually having fun? If you're not, sell it. Enjoy the money. I'm sure you can have a lot more fun with the billions of dollars that they're going to give you to walk away and give someone else the chance to deal with this heartbreak and heartburn.
I'm going to go to the Facebook comments. Okay. I'm going to make a similar argument, but I'm going to make it from a more business standpoint as well. And that is, do you really want these headaches anymore? Sam said, time to let San Diego go to L.A., but then a couple of people responded. There was Norma who responded, and Dominic says, I don't think L.A. wants the Chargers. And now the Chargers are in a really tough spot. They're trying to get the stadium here in San Diego, and we'll discuss Measure C in a moment because it got a big endorsement today.
It did.
From the mayor of San Diego, which could change things a little bit. But if that doesn't work out, they're sitting here in San Diego still with no stadium solution. They have the option to go to L.A., but guess what? The Rams are 3-1.
They're better than you.
They're exciting the community.
They're significantly better than you.
You know, they're better than you right now.
And
you
they're
could
there
go.
first.
You could move up to L.A. and instantly be the most forgotten team in football.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a great situation in
No.
Los Angeles. Obviously, it's not ideal without a stadium here either. Maybe you don't want to have to figure that out at this point. You could sell your team. Forbes says, hey, if you've got the LA option, Forbes says you're worth like $2 billion.
That's the thing. Sell now until the LA option before the LA option gets ripped off the table and the value of your franchise goes down.
So, I mean, that would be my argument. I don't think it's ever going to happen. And, hey, the Chargers have won. You know, they not a Super Bowl, but they've had some successful seasons with the Spanos family owning the team. Let's not argue. I mean, probably the best, longest stretch of successful Chargers football, you know, the mid to late 2000s under Marty and Norv, all came under Spanos ownership. It's not like they had a tremendous amount of success under previous owners like, you know, Barron Hilton or, you know, C. Arnold Smith, or he owned the Padres. I don't even remember who owned, but Gene Klein, who owned the Chargers before. They weren't, you know, world beaters. They had a couple good years with Fouts where they did the same thing they did in the 2000s. They underperformed in the playoffs. But that was it.
But what exists now that didn't exist then is parity. Parity across the league. Every year there's 2 or 3 teams that have never really been successful, never really been playoff contenders, championship contenders, that get boosted up to that level. And it's usually with an influx of new president, new GM, new coaching staff. I mean, we're seeing it this year with the Eagles, who haven't been good for a couple of years. They get a new coach, they get a new GM, and all of a sudden things are heading in the right direction. So I think it could very quickly turn into a playoff contending, championship contending team, especially with a quarterback like Phillip Rivers. I think the sad part about this is we're not so much angry about this week or even this year or last year. It's just becoming disappointing, the opportunities they've squandered with a quarterback of Phillip Rivers' talent.
I just want to remind everyone that we're at Social Tap San Diego at J Street, just outside Petco Park. We can see Petco Park from where we're sitting. You see into the restaurant behind us. Stop by anytime. John enjoying one of the many draft brews on tap.
I needed one today.
Monday Night Football specials. You got the burger and the beer special tonight.
I may be doing that.
And enjoy the game. Who do we got? The Giants?
And the Vikings.
Vikings
Very
tonight
good
from the
game.
new stadium. Yeah, good one tonight. Plus, the brand new location by San Diego State now open, even though the grand opening isn't until later this month. You can go by, check it out. So 2 locations, Social Tap San Diego, our gracious hosts here for Bolts on Tap. Puck Mad Damo tweeted us, scarily, I predicted them losing 35-34 back when it was 34-21.
So did I.
Yeah, it's sort of pretty much everyone had that.
Yeah.
How could they lose this game? Really, the only way at this point they can lose would be 35-34.
The funny thing was, when I came up with the idea of us starting this show today by saying, we left in the last 6 minutes and we enjoyed a wonderful Chargers victory, I realized that there's not a Chargers fan in the world that felt safe up 34-21 with 6 minutes left in the game, because they've just been proven over and over and over again to not be good enough to hold that kind of lead.
And what's scary, and I thought Dwight Lowry has been, although he's one of the newest Chargers, he's not afraid to speak his mind.
Good for him.
The new safety. And something he said in the locker room should be disturbing to everyone in there, including the coaching staff. He said the most disappointing thing is we're not learning from it.
Oh, well.
That is not a good comment.
Oh, man.
And he's the same guy who was also questioning the injuries, why they're all happening to the Chargers, that they didn't seem to happen with other teams he's been on. So you want a good controversial soundbite, go find Dwight Lowry's locker.
Yeah, it's, at this point, Dwight Lowry, a veteran who's been with several different teams at this point, should be able to come in and give you the clearest look at how the culture compares to other NFL teams. And, Brandon Mebane comes in and says, he doesn't say things are great. He says, I'm going to be a leader here. I'm going to make sure we have a championship mindset and everything. But Dwight Lowry comes in and very black and white, cut and dry, says, this is a bad culture. We're not learning from our mistakes. We don't know why we keep getting injured. I think there was another quote from him yesterday where he said, we have no idea why we're losing. And it's just, it gives you an idea that the Chargers think they're doing things right, but never compare it to what other teams are doing.
All right, we're getting some questions about the non-safety call when Drew Brees took that sack. And even Rob, who's our fantastic engineer on the other side of the camera, asked before the game, why was that not a safety?
Why was it not challenged?
I didn't think it was a safety. Forward progress is pretty, when the officials see that the quarterback gets bumped, it's where the ball was to begin with, not where he falls back to.
Okay.
And I thought Brees was at the 1.5-yard line when he got knocked back into the end zone. They're always going to move it out. And
I thought when the ball, when his knee hit down, I thought the ball was on the goal line.
But that's not where it is. You could be on the 2, and if they bump you back 3 yards into the end zone and your knee goes down there, they're still going to bring it all the way back to the 2.
Okay. I had a question about that, and then I had a question about there was a play where Phillip Rivers and a wide receiver had a total miscommunication. He dropped back in the pocket. It seemed like there was pressure on him. He launched a ball about 25 yards downfield to nobody. There was no one there. And I was like, why is that not intentional grounding? Are they just assuming that his wide receiver screwed up the route? I mean, you could make the argument that he could try and make that argument, but at the end of the day, there was pressure on him. He threw the ball. It didn't go anywhere near a receiver.
I've seen that called before.
Yeah, I was very...
Was that the play that Phillip Rivers got into, was it Inman's face for running the wrong route? Then went right back to him the next play for a big completion.
Yes.
I like that leadership that we saw from Phillip Rivers. There were a couple of positives, actually, in this game.
I thought Phillip Rivers played a tremendous game. I mean, they were up 34-21, and like I said, the only person on offense that I thought was having a good game was Phillip Rivers. Dontrell Inman was the biggest receiver on the day, but he wasn't doing anything special. He was just happy to be on the field, and Phillip Rivers was great. And I thought the defense played very well. I thought the pass rush was very good. Outside of those last 2 drives where the Saints had all the momentum and only had to go, I think, a total of 45 yards, the defense was great, and Rivers was great, and those are certainly things we shouldn't ignore.
Phillip Rivers, I thought, made a good point. He said, hey, the Saints are known to have a great offense under Drew Brees. Our defense held them to 21 points. Okay, yes, we put them in horrible position twice in the last 5 minutes that led to the last 2 touchdowns, but, given a fair situation, they held them to 21 points. That's good. That should be enough for us to win every time. And it's lost in the final score. And people got mad when I tweeted this last night because they don't care. Win is all that matters.
Yeah.
Phillip Rivers outperformed Drew Brees yesterday at quarterback.
By quite a bit.
I thought it was significant. 321 yards, 207 yards, both threw 2 touchdowns. Brees had 2 interceptions. Phillip threw that one at the end, but that one was
like a
punt. 4th
punt.
and 22 desperation.
Yeah.
It was a desperation. You had to throw it up. Both of the Brees interceptions were pretty critical when they came. I thought it was fairly obvious that Phillip Rivers was the better quarterback on the field yesterday. I'm not making a broad judgment about the whole careers or whether Brees should have stayed or whether he should have gone.
No.
I'm just saying yesterday, Rivers won that matchup.
And I don't think that Brees was really that bad, but Jason Verrett showed back up. Jason Verrett was fantastic. Casey Hayward, in his first real start in Brandon Flowers' place, was as great as he's been as the nickel cornerback. And the pass rush was actually there. That's all you need. The inside linebackers, it took them a while to figure out what they were doing because it's essentially 2 rookies, especially once Perriman went down, who's only a second-year player. But the defense as a whole played very, very well. And actually, I wanted to look. The leading receiver for the New Orleans Saints was Mark Ingram, the running back. The leading receiver as far as non-running backs was Michael Thomas, who had 44 yards. So Jason Verrett, Casey Hayward, give them stars, give them a pat on the back, let them know, hey, you didn't lose this game for us.
Maurice wants to know on Facebook, do the Chargers lack a killer instinct?
Yes.
That's easy.
Absolutely.
Good question, Maurice.
Yeah.
It's one we can answer.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the type of thing that comes from coaching. And I think that's why you see when, I'll give you an example. Rex Ryan is not a great coach. He's not a great X's and O's guy, I don't think. He doesn't come up with incredible game plans, although as a defensive coordinator, he was very good. But one thing he does, he instills that killer instinct in his players. Says, men, we're going to go out today and we're going to beat some people up.
I guarantee you that everyone in that Chargers locker room would dispute our diagnosis that the Chargers lack a killer instinct. Because I think individually you'd go in there and you find a bunch of guys who have always had killer instincts.
Yeah.
I mean, they're football players. They've had success in college. They've gotten to this level by having a killer instinct. So they're going, of course I have a killer instinct. And you probably do. And so does the guy next to you. And so does the guy across from you in practice. Collectively, though, is where the Chargers lack the killer instinct. And somehow that's different. You can put 53 guys out there, all of them with killer instincts, but that doesn't mean collectively as a team you're going to have one. And you can't have one unless you show it, and they haven't shown it.
No, it's been said time and time again, and I'll say it again right now. Your team can have 53 different personalities in that locker room. At the end of the day, they're going to take on the mentality of their coach. And I think the Chargers have taken on the mentality of their coach. And I don't think Mike McCoy knows what he's doing. And I don't think Mike McCoy knows whether or not he's good enough to pull this off. And the doubts that are creeping into his mind are now starting to creep into his players' minds. You saw that in Dwight Lowry's quote. You saw it in Keenan Allen's tweets. I think it's safe to say at this point, Mike McCoy has lost the confidence and the faith of the locker room.
Very fair statement, which is why you wonder why he's still around. If that's true, unless you can get it back, and not many coaches do, then what are you still here for?
They are unbelievably stubborn. They always have been, and they always will be from the ownership on down.
All right, just a couple minutes left, and I got 2 big issues I want to get to. First, on the field, are the Chargers careening toward a 1-7 start? They're 1-3 now through a quarter of the season. The next quarter of the season, arguably the hardest schedule-wise that they've got. 3 out of 4 on the road, 3 out of 4 against division opponents, and all 4 teams they're playing, Oakland, Denver, Atlanta, and Denver again, either 3-1 or 4-0 at this point in the season. Where do we see any wins in that foursome? I mean, 2-2 would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
And that still only gets them to 3-5, where they probably still need to go 7-1 the rest of the way to make the playoffs. That's why it's a dire situation now after losing that game yesterday.
Well, I think when you and I picked games before the season, you said you thought they were going to win one of those Denver games. Do you want to take that back? Even when Paxton Lynch is the quarterback, you want to take that back?
They're going to win one of these 4, right?
So
maybe that's still the short week Denver game.
Unless I'm mistaken, I believe Oakland is 3-0 on the road.
They are.
So they're getting a home game in front of their crowd. Who it's probably the last year at Oakland or something close to it. Their fans are excited to finally see a good football team in Oakland. That's going to be a tough one to win. I don't see how the Chargers beat the Broncos because I think there's about 4 or 5 teams that could stand a chance to beat the Broncos right now. I don't care if a scarecrow is playing quarterback for them. Atlanta, to me, is a bit of a paper tiger. I know they have a great offense, but their defense has holes.
About 92 points in the last couple of weeks.
They didn't look good to start the season. Atlanta, remember, started 5-0 last year and then missed the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised if San Diego finds a way to win that Atlanta game, but the other three, I imagine they come out of that 4-game thing going 1-3, which would make them their 1-3 now, right? So that'd be 2-6.
2-6.
That's
basically,
not a great start.
9-7 doesn't guarantee anything in the NFL, so basically you'd have to sweep the table in the second half of the season. Ouch. Okay, last thing, because it is 1 o'clock. The big news today on the stadium front was an endorsement from Mayor Kevin Faulconer on Measure C after what he says extracting some concessions from the Chargers, guaranteeing that no general dollars would go toward stadium overages or purchase of property, making sure that the Chargers are in town for the entire length of any bonds that are issued. I mean, smart, I think, common sense things. And if this is what Kevin Faulconer was waiting around for, hey, good for him. Trying to make the deal as good as possible for the city of San Diego.
This drives me nuts. This is just like the Joey Bosa thing. If these are the concessions that the mayor wanted and the Chargers were willing to give them to him, why did we do this 4 months ago? Why didn't the mayor come to the Chargers 4 months ago and say, I want this? Because of how many screw-ups they've had, and I'm going to throw the Bosa thing out there, it makes me think that the Chargers were the ones holding out on this and that they called him up after a horrible loss, seeing their fan base scurrying away, burying the ballot measure C, and Dean Spanos called up the mayor in the middle of the night and said, you know what, you got a deal, I'll give you everything you want. I kind of hope that's what happened because I want to see Dean Spanos get embarrassed like that, but at the same time, it's just like, I think it's too late. I think it's too little too late.
Well, it's a great point because none of the concessions were, earth-shatteringly huge. I mean, it's basically what the Chargers have been saying all along with a little more assurance on each one that it's actually going to happen.
Right.
So, it's been a long, drawn-out process for not a huge result. And we do have a poll up at 10news.com, just an online poll, but the latest, a lot of people responding, and I saw up to almost 20% of people responding say they were a no vote, but now that the mayor says he's endorsing it or switching over to yes. If that's true, that's huge. I mean, you go from like 40 to 60% that happens.
Now my question, knowing that information, is how much is he endorsing it? Will he do commercials? Will there be commercials running every 5 minutes on Channel 10 of the mayor saying, you need to vote for this stadium for the future of San Diego? Because that'll go a long way. If it's just, I'm going to say I endorse it and then I'm going to walk away quietly, that's not going to help
That's a good point. And I'm guessing right now that we're not going to see the mayor front and center in the Yes on C campaign. I know the No on C people are gathering over there at the library to, fight back today. So I'm sure that'll be a story we'll be covering tonight on 10 News. And we'll be following Raiders Week all week long. It's still Raiders Week.
It is Raiders Week.
You can't take that away. If you want to continue your Chargers discussion right now this second, Darren Smith is hitting hour number 2 of his program on your station, the Mighty 1090, so you can catch more then.
He is. I'm sure he's doing a great job interviewing a lot of people. I know they were trying to, as they get once a week, they get Phillip Rivers on. I know they were trying to get him today. I don't know if they're going to be having him on, but I'm going to be really interested to hear his conversation because I know he was in a pretty dark place yesterday in that press conference.
I mean, borderline verge of tears.
Yeah.
What you love to see is someone who cares and is emotional as your quarterback. Great. Let's just hopefully he doesn't have to go to that place again.
Well, if we had more time, and maybe we can do it on our podcast sometime this week, I want to ask you the question of how would you feel about Phillip Rivers if he came out and demanded a trade this week?
Oh, good question for another day. Don't forget, if you haven't come by and stopped by Social Tap San Diego yet, do so. Great food, great beer, TVs all over the place. Great for football watching. For John Gennaro, I'm Ben Higgins. Thanks for joining us on Bolts on Tap. We'll see you again next Monday at 12:30.